Howdy, folks. In today's episode, we're talking storm chasing and winning Pulitzer Prizes right after this. Welcome to Camera Take, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get into it, I've got one thing to ask of you. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. I mean, come on, people. You can really help us out help me out by hitting that subscribe button. It'll help me get even more amazing guests on the show. Just one click. That's all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, the Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist, Kevin Painchaud. Kevin, man, how's it going?
It's going great. Very good.
Fantastic. I hope I didn't completely mangle your name. How do you pronounce it? It's Painchaud, isn't it?
Painchaud, you're correct. It's French, so a lot of French people, I say Painchaud. What are you doing? It's because in French it's Painchaud, but I don't speak French, so just Painchaud.
Fantastic. I'm not too far from the French border at this very minute because I'm in a slightly different environment today, but it's all good. Luckily, due to technology, we can make these episodes anywhere nowadays, which is phenomenal. Anyway, I introduced you as a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist, and your story is absolutely phenomenal. Give us a helicopter view over the event that eventually led to you winning, and you and your team winning the Pulitzer Prize.
So it was New Year's Day last year, 2023. And we knew that there's a bunch of storms, atmospheric rivers are coming in to the Central Coast in California where I live. And so that January 1st was a Sunday. And so our whole team was, I'm part of a local online-only news team called Lookout Santa Cruz. And there's a total of 10 of us in the newsroom, 6 reporters. I'm the only photojournalist, and then we have about 3 editors. And so everybody was on holidays except for our managing editor, Tamsin, and myself. So when the first storm hit on Sunday, Tamsin and I kind of connected up, and I just started going and reporting on what I was seeing. And then these atmospheric rivers ended up coming one after another that lasted for 3 months. So 3 months of constant, nonstop raining.
I was going to ask you, because I read this when I read the background about the actual event. What is an atmospheric river? What is that?
So basically, it's I'm going to screw this up, but it's a huge amount of moisture that is basically in the sky that's funneling in, and so it when we were growing up, we just called it storms, but it's just a condensed amount of humidity that it comes in and just starts pouring in. So it's just a tech term that I had actually never heard up until several years ago when they called them atmospheric rivers. And when I was growing up, we just called them storms. But it was just crazy because for 3 months it was just raining nonstop. So it's one after another. And so on January 4th was a big one because we had, so we're here in Santa Cruz, so we're around the coast. And this one morning we had 20-foot swells, plus we had high tides, plus because of the storms before, we had super saturated soil, which made it a perfect storm for just catastrophic damage all over the Central Coast. We had 2 of our piers that completely got destroyed. They're the Capitola Village, which is right on the coast. There's a bunch of restaurants that are along this river and that are also on the beach that got really wiped out. We had houses that, just went down in landslides. We had trees going down. And it was the entire county, which is over 600 square miles is our county from the north to the south. And the geography of Santa Cruz is very unique, where you have the beach, but then you have the redwood forest, and then you have the ag land of like Watsonville, where it's all farmland. Then you have the city, and so you have every kind of environment that you can imagine all in one small area. And a lot of these places, there's only like one access road in and out. So during these storms, there were times where, whole communities would be flooded. And so you have communities that were completely trapped and isolated up in the hill, where online news team that we were able to get our information out immediately, like, on the spot. So as opposed to newspaper where, you're writing it and then basically the next day, and a lot with TV stuff, you got to edit it. This stuff, we were just pumping out content constantly. So what was really interesting and was that as soon as the storms really started hitting, our entire team, all 6 of us or 7 of us, including me, everybody knew what we needed to do. Everybody knew our community, and they just went to the areas that they knew. So Wallace Bain, who's our entertainment reporter, he lives in the South area. So he went to like the Watsonville area. Mark Conley, one of our other reporters, he went to Midtown. We had Chris Neely, he went up into the mountains. So everybody went to where the area that they live and the area that they wanted to focus on. And so it was very much that everybody was doing their own thing because we knew what needed to be done.
And presumably, because it was the holiday season, presumably lots of people were away and at holiday, and you had to sort of pull people in first of all.
Yes.
But, I mean, how much did you expect this storm front to arrive? I mean, was this sort of a known event? I mean, did you know it was coming, or was it a surprise?
So the first one, we knew it was coming, but we didn't know how bad it was. And the first one that came on January 1st, it wasn't that bad. There was some damage, some trees down, some landslides, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't until January 4th, and that's when our whole team was back in working mode. It was January 4th was when it really hit really, really bad. And it's that point that for myself, I was looking, I'm like, this is going to be bad. We got to really buckle down. And this is serious. And so that's when everybody started getting, high alert mode and just dropped everything that we're all working on and just focus on getting the information out there.
Because that's like on a normal day. And I would say this because I've actually driven through your area before. I've driven from San Francisco all the way to Monterey, so I would have come, past Santa Cruz and through that whole area. And I have to say, that whole coastline is it's a thing of beauty. It's absolutely stunning, and on a nice day, it's the most beautiful place to be. But on a day like this, I mean, I know how small and sort of semi-isolated the communities around that area actually are. So, I mean, on a normal day, what would be the thing that you would be reporting on, like on any other day?
Because I'm their only photojournalist, and so we have 6 correspondents, and then we have a bunch of columnists. So my day, I have anywhere from 3 to 6 assignments a day, and it totally ranges from shooting politicians to whether doing protests at the UCSC, which is the big college that's up here, to doing restaurant reviews. I'll do a lot of shots for restaurants, to shooting sports. So it, for me, every single day is just completely random. I'll wake up in the morning and I have a single assignment, and by the end of the day, I'll have 6 assignments done. And so I never know exactly where my day is going to lead me, but it's just so varied. Like I said, from restaurants to doing profiles on people to shooting a band. So it's totally random. And we just live in the greatest area that I think in the country, and we just love it here so much.
And because you're so woven into the community there, I guess you also know a lot of people, and a lot of people that eventually would be affected by this deluge in the end. So when that day came, like when the storms started happening, what was the first reaction of your team? Was there a plan in place already, or like was it, the shock horror? What the heck are we going to do?
So that's what it was that everybody dropped everything and there was no plan. Everybody literally just dropped everything and knew the areas that they needed to report on. So Tamsin, our managing editor, she was at her office, and basically she was just saying, okay, Wallace, are you going to be over here? Chris, you're going to be over here? Or they were checking in with her, letting them know where they were, letting Tamsin know where they were. And so she was just kind of managing it, like what everybody's doing and bringing in all the content and writing it up and editing it. But everybody was very much self-contained and doing the reporting that they knew that they needed to do. So it was very much self-directed. And because everybody here knows the community and knows, all the politicians really well, we know the environment, and we know that we knew where we focus on. And so it gave us unique insight to get the coverage that we needed to get. One of our other reporters mentioned, like, during the storm, it was a situation where you could not have somebody from like the New York Times or somebody that just, parachutes in and just gets the coverage they need, because they wouldn't know the communities that need to be hit and need to be covered. They didn't know the people. But because this is our community, the coverage, the reports, the stories that really meant something. And it was those stories that we were able to spend time with people in the communities, people with the farm workers down in Watsonville that were being flooded, or with people up in the Santa Cruz Mountains that their whole house is at risk of being, destroyed in a landslide. That we knew these communities, we knew these people, and we were able to develop this rapport and this connection with them and hear their stories and to really report and cover these stories in a way that an outsider wouldn't be able to do. And for me as a photojournalist, it was very interesting because I had to go everywhere. I was the one that was driving them through everywhere while everybody is, focusing on the mountains or focusing in certain areas. I was pretty much all day, every day, driving to as many different places as I can, but also spending time hearing the stories and understanding what was going on, so I can take the important photos and try to tell the entire story through photos and sometimes videos as I could.
And how did the situation evolve over that span of like that first week, for example? Because you said it was in the beginning, you didn't think it was necessarily going to be that bad, and then it just got from bad to worse as the days went by. How did it develop over the first week, let's say?
So like I had mentioned, in the first part of the storms was slow, and then it started picking up. And the whole team just became really, really focused. And as the storms kept on hitting, we just pushed all the emotions aside and just focused on what we needed to do. What was the information that we needed to send out to the community? So as the storms got worse and worse, we just had to, really focus on and pinpoint where the major areas are that were affected, and go up there and talk to the people and spend time and understand what the situations were, where the evacuation sites were. We had to contact all the first responders, what roads were closed, what rivers were potential potentially going to be overflowing, what communities were at risk of being flooded. So it was, there were certain people that were completely focused on just getting the information from the emergency services that we needed to keep the whole community informed of what was going on. And so the worse it got, the more focused we got. There was never a sense of panic within the news team at all. Tamsin, who lives over the hill, she stayed in a motel for weeks because she couldn't attempt to drive over the hill because it's precarious, and she wanted to be safe, and also wanted to make sure that we're there, being able to spend the hours that needed to be done to report the story correctly and to get the information out.
And it's hard to describe without seeing the photos. And I have seen the photos. And again, let me remind those listeners on audio that, if you want to see some of those really incredible images, make sure you hop over to YouTube, where, I'll be flying these images in as we speak. And likewise, of course, make sure you join our Facebook group as well, where I'll be posting some of those. But I mean, it's really hard to describe without seeing the images how drastic the impact was. I mean, I've seen highways or whole roads swept away, landslides destroying all sorts of infrastructure, and then you're the only photojournalist, the only photographer, trying to get to all these places, covering the flooding and the landslides and the destruction and the human pain. How difficult was it under those circumstances to even get from one place to another?
It was very stressful. So I have a wife and 13-year-old daughter now, and I would, it was tough because I'd be gone from early in the morning until late at night. And so the first thing I would need to do is figure out where areas that I needed to be at to tell the story, and to make sure that the roads were open and what the situation was. So luckily I have a 4-wheel drive car. And so I was able to drive to a lot of these places, but it was a lot of times I would drive through these streets that were flooded over, and I'd be holding my breath that I'd be able to make it back through. And it would be completely flooded over. And there's many times where I would leave, go shoot, and by the time I came back to my car, the water was up to the bottom of the door. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I would leave, and literally, 10, 15 minutes later, my car would have been washed away. So there was a couple times where I just said, look, I can't go there, especially when up in the mountains, that I just knew that there's one lane road going in and out, and the roads were so treacherous. There's so many landslides and trees coming down that if I went up there and there was a tree that came down or a landslide, there's no way for me to get out. So there were certain times where I'm like, look, I just can't go over there. And so at those times, sometimes I would call or text people that I knew that lived up there and say, hey, look, do you think you could take a photo on your cell phone and let me know what the situation is? But most of the time I'm driving around everywhere and telling these stories, and it got to be very emotionally draining, especially when I was in the town of Pajaro in March. The levee in the town of Pajaro completely broke and flooded the entire town. And I'd spent 4 or 5 days over there, and there was a lot of migrant farm workers that lost everything. They lost their trailers. They lost all their belongings. I met this one family that there was a family of 7 that they got a knock on the door at midnight that said from the fire department said, you got to leave now. The levee's going to breach. So they left the town of Pajaro, go to Watsonville, which is just over the river, another little town. And they ended up having to stay with her sister, I think it was. And so they ended up being a family of 13 people staying in a 1-bedroom apartment. When you cross the bridge to get to Watsonville from Pajaro that was flooded, they weren't allowed to come back into Pajaro because it was flooded. The other was that they were afraid of looters. They didn't know if their home was still there, if any of the belongings was still there. Hearing these stories, and you see these people in agony, not knowing what's going to happen to them. A lot of them, were farm workers, and all the farms were flooded. And so you see these lives just completely shattered, and trying to capture these images and listen to these stories, it got really heartbreaking. In the town of Soquel, there's mobile home parks that the river got flooded over and destroyed a lot of these mobile homes, and there was black mold growing everywhere. And once again, you're just seeing these people wading through mud and just trying to get anything that they could to salvage, but they didn't know what they're going to do. When I was down at Aptos, there was these houses that were on the beach that the waves completely destroyed many of their houses. This one image that I took, that was one of the main ones that was for the Pulitzer, and also won News Photo of the Year from the California Journalism Awards, showed this guy throwing out all of his belongings when this wave completely ripped out the whole front of his house. And you see the storm, and the waves, in the background. It's one of those things that, as a photojournalist, you kind of you have this lens that is separates you from getting too emotional, because you're focused on the framing and what you're seeing, and you try not to let it emotionally take you in. But when you put the camera down and you start speaking to these people, it's tough. It gets really tough. So it was pretty heavy at times.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. What was that point where, you're coming home every night and you've got to process everything that you see and everything that's happened, that day. And at the same time, I'm guessing you don't even know how long this is going to go on for and what the next day might bring. How did you cope with that? Also knowing that the next day you're going to have to go out there again and do it all over again. Does that affect you in any way?
What's funny about that question is that it's all kind of a blur, because there was so much going on during that time, and all of us in the news team were just doing what we know that needed to be done. We weren't really thinking about tomorrow, and we had to process these photos. We had to submit these stories. We didn't have time to think about what tomorrow was going to hold. And we had no idea how long these storms were going to last. Nobody knew that they're going to be lasting for 3 months. I remember every single day, it was sort of like I come home and, hug my family and just take a real deep breath and take some time just to breathe and, processing the photos and kind of taking in what I experienced that day. But you literally had no idea what was going to happen the next day. So there was no anticipation. It was sort of helpful in a psychological way because you don't have so much anxiety because you're just working on what's going on right now.
And just for our viewers on YouTube, the internet is a little bit choppy today, so just ignore that. I think this story is so super interesting. We can forgive the internet overlords for not playing ball entirely today. How far away from the epicenter of that was your family? Did you worry about their safety at all in all of this?
Where we live in Aptos, and we were definitely hit hard. But where our townhouse is really safe. But literally right, we're right across the freeway is, we're a 12-minute walk from the beach. And it's that beach that all these houses got destroyed, where the pier got destroyed. And they actually had to tear the pier down at Seacliff State Beach. They had to end up tearing that down. So we're literally all around us was being destroyed. So where we live, if we look down, there's Soquel Creek, and in that creek, it rose, had to have been 10 feet high, and all of the trees that are along the creek caved in. A lot of huge erosion. It just transformed the whole area, which is basically right below us. And so at night you're hearing these trees coming down left and right. So it was nerve-wracking, but luckily where we're at was fairly safe. I know that my family was really nervous for me driving around. They didn't know where I was or if I was safe. I tried to, text them as often as I can just to let them know where I was and roughly when thought I was going to be home, but just let them know I was safe. But they had a lot of anxiety. But I wasn't too concerned about our safety here because the specific area that we lived was fairly safe, even though everything around us was falling to pieces.
How easy was it to communicate? I mean, was it, I'm guessing, did it have an impact on, cell phone, masts, and were you still able to communicate relatively easily, or what sort of effect did it have?
Yeah, the infrastructure was pretty good. On the news team, everybody was basically messaging either through Slack or text messages. Nobody really would call, but the infrastructure was pretty good. Power was out a lot. That was true. And PG&E had, it was all hands on deck with PG&E. There's an old drive-in movie theater that's been abandoned forever. And PG&E had that as their headquarters. And so there was, 50 electronic trucks that, the electricity trucks that were there to kind of working 24/7 to get power back. So yeah, power was off and on pretty constantly for those 3 months.
And I guess it was an essential service really for for the entire population of that area, because it was crucial for people to get their information from somewhere. And I know I read that even there used to be a paywall, I believe, and then you took the paywall down just to make that information available to everyone.
Because the newspaper, people needed to get information right now to know what was going on. They couldn't get on the paper because that would come up the next day. TV, a lot of times they was just TV and radio wasn't doing the best coverage because there's only so much that they can do. So we were everywhere. And so we had to, actually, I have these statistics. In the first month, we put out, from January 1st to January 17th, we put out 83 stories, 30 email alerts, 86 updates on our blog, and 157 social media posts on both Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Basically, what we're doing constantly, nonstop, we're doing this for the whole 3 months, is that we were constantly letting people know what the latest was all over the county as often as we can throughout the day. And so we'd always have, where evacuation centers are, where people can get resources, where they can get sandbags and chargers if the power was out. A lot of restaurants would offer free food for people that, their houses were destroyed. How to provide grants through FEMA. We would do live updates on roads that were closing, the status of rivers. And so it was essential that we give everybody this info. So we completely dropped the payroll on a website. Normally, if you have to be a member to get a lot of the stories on Lookout, we dropped that, everything storm coverage, because we were the single consistent source of information for the entire county. And even to this day, we get people that thank us. They said that they would be up in the mountains feeling helpless, and that we were their only source of information of what was going on. And that was consistent, throughout the entire time, where we wanted to be the one resource that people can rely on. It was also important that we held federal, state, and local governments accountable for what was going on and for things that they say were going to happen, and make sure that they were in fact going to happen. We had Governor Newsom come in, we had FEMA come in, President Biden even came to our area. And so we were constantly doing updates on what they were there for and what they were providing and what was going on. So we wanted to be the single source that everybody in the county can come to know exactly what was going on.
And when the president flies in to look at an area like this, then it's bad, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it was like Newsom came several times. California Governor Newsom came several times. We had senators and congressmen, and like I said, we had the head of FEMA came, and so it was bad. Yeah.
And now, more than a year on, or a year and a half on, what's the sort of aftermath of it in the area now?
So there's still a lot of unanswered questions. FEMA is there's a lot of people that are still, and the county is still waiting for a lot of money from FEMA to cover a lot of the damages. There is a lot of roads that are destroyed that aren't able to get repaired because our county just doesn't have the funds to repair them. There are certain roads that are right on the cliff. There's what's called West Cliff Drive that got incredible amount of damage, and that we don't know how long that road's actually going to be held up. There's a lot of long-term damage that is unrepairable, and a lot of people that are still affected. There's still a lot of the migrant workers down in South County that still don't have housing. It's a year later, there's still a lot of stuff that is not good. Just one of in Pajaro, one of the middle schools that got completely flooded and the whole school got damaged. They actually kind of rebuilt the entire school. And so they just had an opening last week. And so that was kind of a big celebration. And I covered that, which was really nice. And because previously the students had to commute sometimes 45 minutes to an hour to another school in another community just to go to school. So they were sharing schools with another school. It was a weird situation. But so that, there's a lot of good stories that have come, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of people that are still, without resolution and without fixes.
Whenever somebody says there's questions about FEMA, it always reminds me of Hurricane Katrina back in the 90s. Was it early 2000s over in New Orleans? Because there were certainly a lot of questions about FEMA at that time as well, I remember.
Yeah.
I think one of the worst things when it comes to events like this is, of course, you've got a lot of property damage, infrastructure damage and all the rest of it, but it's usually the human suffering that's really the worst. And I wonder if, as far as the community is concerned, how long these scars will still exist in the community. What's your sort of sense are people still sort of reeling from that event, or are people trying to get their lives together and move on?
It's very much trying to get our lives together and move on. Our community here in Santa Cruz County is incredibly resilient. Back in '89, there was a huge earthquake that destroyed much of Santa Cruz. We rebuilt. In 2020, there's a huge CZU fire, which I did a lot of coverage for as well, that destroyed over 1,000 homes and burned hundreds of thousands of acres throughout Santa Cruz Mountains and into San Mateo County. And a lot of those communities bounced back. These floods have happened in the 80s previously. We bounced back. It's an incredibly resilient community that love where we live. And we're tight-knit community that we rely on each other when things are really tough. And it's beautiful to see, but there is still a lot of people that are really hurting. There's the unhoused community, unhoused population has skyrocketed. A lot of it because of the flooding and especially in Pajaro. But our community, it's resilient. So it's a lot of, okay, now what? We're going to bounce back. We're still going to live here. We're going to, rebuild. And there's a lot of questions because of our proximity of where we're at. We're real susceptible to global warming, both because of seawater rising, because of these insane storms that really have an effect on us because of both the rivers and the mountains and the ocean, and then the wildfire fires. Is that we are extremely susceptible to global warming, to the effects of it. But this community and where we live, like I said, we think this is the best spot in the entire world. And so we're willing to do what it takes to rebuild and just keep going.
And it is insanely beautiful in that corner of the world. Have you lived there all your life? Is that where you're originally from?
Yeah, I was born and raised actually in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Have you seen things change, climate-wise, since you were a kid, for example?
Yeah, well, yes. I have seen the extremes more now, and like where you have these really, really, really high temperatures and then just insane storms that last forever. I never remember seeing in the 80s. I remember we had a lot of really big storms. I think it's 86. That was comparable to the ones that we had just seen, but not the effects on the environment as it is now, where it's just, you're having complete, carnage in certain areas because of flooding and because of, um, the fire, the CZU fire, which was, devastating to our area, and that's because of, global warming, because we had the drought. We had what was it, like about 20-year drought. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, I see a lot of effects of the global warming and, from growing up here, how it's gotten worse.
So let's talk a little bit about the Pulitzer Prize, because you've set the scene really well. I mean, it's absolutely mind blowing, to have to experience that and live through that, and then of course to keep it all together and report on that on a daily basis. So how does one win the Pulitzer Prize? Give us sort of an idea as to how that came together. How did that happen?
All right. So on. This is a year after, after the storms. It was on May 5th of this year. On Sunday, our managing editor sent a Slack message to the entire team. And she says, mandatory meeting tomorrow at 10:30. And everybody needs to be in the office by 11:30. And then she said, don't worry, it's good news. Nobody had any idea what she was talking about. I know that we were up for some award in September. It was going to be announced for some award that we won. And she had mentioned that, like a month or two previous. And so we're thinking maybe it's something about that award that, we're going to be winning in September. But nobody had any clue what it was. On that Monday morning, 10:30 a.m. I just got done with a shoot of shooting a restaurant, and so I was downstairs in their parking garage, and we all logged in on Slack, no, on Zoom. We were all logged in on Zoom, and when we finally all were there, Tamsin just blurted out. Tamsin's our managing editor. She just blurted out, "We won the Pulitzer," and there was dead silence on Zoom. Nobody had any idea what she was talking about. We're like, what? Huh? And then she said, we won the Pulitzer Prize for our coverage of the storms from last year. And there was a pause, and everybody was really surprised and blown away. I just started crying. I could not stop crying because everything that I have experienced in the past came flooding through me, and all my insecurities and things that I've had to deal with came rushing through my body. And it was like every emotion that I've ever had and doubt that I've ever had came through me. It was just overwhelming, and I just could not stop crying. And then she said, I spent the last several weeks putting together the application to submit us to the Pulitzer Prize. I did not want to tell anybody because I didn't want anybody to doubt what I was doing. She didn't tell anybody on her team that she won the Pulitzer Prize, not even our boss. Our boss didn't even know until that Sunday. On that Sunday, I guess she was in the shower. She got a call. She missed a call. She went back and checked her phone, looked at the translation from her phone, and she saw Pulitzer. She saw the word Pulitzer, and she's like, "Oh my God!" She immediately listened to the message, said that won the Pulitzer Prize. She said about an hour or two trying to call back that number. Finally got hold of them, and then was confirming. She's like, "Lookout Santa Cruz," and like spelling it to make sure they didn't make a mistake. And they said, "No, you guys won the Pulitzer Prize for breaking news." And then she called and let her boss know that she had submitted us to the Pulitzer and that we in fact won. And so At the time on that Monday, nobody knew at all that she even submitted us to the Pulitzer. So when she made that announcement, it was literally a complete shock. And it was a slap in the face where it's like, that wasn't even in any of us, like that was never a thought in our mind that we could put out Pulitzer Prize winning content. And for me, being a photojournalist, Pulitzer Prize winners are like the war photographers, or the people that spend like months or 6 months over in Africa reporting on the famine, or it's people in the these huge news groups like the New York Times and the LA Times, and these huge news teams, not a small community online only news group. And so it was the biggest, most amazing surprise I ever felt in my entire life, and it was just completely out of the blue.
But of course, if you sort of zoom out a little bit, you look at it from a distance, which I know it's going to be difficult for you because you were like right in the middle of it. But when I was reading about it, I thought like, wow, the impact that an event like this has. Because we all know about events like this. I mean, I mentioned, Hurricane Katrina, and how it devastated New Orleans. And I have friends that spend time in New Orleans. I lived there for a little while. I have friends over there, and I know how devastating that event was, for friends and family and everything. And of course, you think of events like 9/11 and, huge catastrophic events that devastate, big cities like New York City or whatnot. But these events have such a incredibly huge impact on small communities too. And, the need for information flow, in particular is so absolutely critical, especially when you're out there. Because, I grew up in small communities like that. I know what it's like having just one road, and if that road goes, you're pretty screwed, and so, I think the impact that what you guys did, on these small communities was absolutely, must have been absolutely massive. So, I look at it and I'm thinking like, this is, absolutely 100% Pulitzer worthy, so, and some of your shots were just incredible.
And that was one of the things was when Tamsin explained why she didn't let us and any of us know. And she explained this. She's like, she'd said that when she saw one of the photos that I submitted, and this was one of the guy with the front of his house destroyed and he's thrown out his belongings. She said that the moment that she saw that and she saw how much reporting we're doing and the content we're sending out, she's like, this is Pulitzer Prize, winning stuff here. And when she was gathering all their information for the Pulitzer, it really hit her. She's like, I think we can really do this because we did do so much for the community and that we provided so much information, and both in blogs, in stories, in email alerts, in Facebook and social media posts, that we were just really just putting everything that we had into the community to give them all the resources and all the information that they needed to be able to survive and to function. That she's like, this is, what we had done was really important. And she's like, this, it's definitely Pulitzer worthy. And when I thought about it, I was like, you know what? She's 100% correct. And the stuff we did, it was important. It was meaningful. And it wasn't that we just wrote, a couple stories and we did just some coverage. It's like, we just threw everything that we had into this, and everybody dropped everything that they're doing and just focused on this 24/7. And we put our heart and souls into it because this is our community and we love our community and we wanted to provide all the information that we could to our community. So it's literally the love that we have for where we live that we did what we did. And it's like, looking back, we're like, I get it. I get why, this stuff, why we won the Pulitzer.
And that's what great journalism is really all about, I think, is that, that love for the community and the love for reporting and the love for, being of service, to the community in that respect. I'm wondering, like, when when things normalized and you went back to sort of covering normal everyday stories. At first, I was thinking, like, I mean, it must have been difficult after all of that. And like, I don't know if that's the story of like somebody's cat escaped. Oh, okay, But on the other hand, I'm thinking like, oh, maybe it was more like, oh, thank God things are going back to normal because, man, I can't do this again. What did that feel like?
It was. When the storms subsided and we did all the reporting, it was kind of like, all right, take a deep breath and now let's just do what we usually do. And it was kind of a relief where we were just all so exhausted after 3 months of doing this, like all hands on deck for 3 months straight. And, we're working 7 days a week all right, we're doing these small community individual stories. And it was a refreshing change back to normalcy. What that was needed.
Did you get some extra holidays?
No, luckily I'm salary, so I'm a staffer, so we have great benefits with our company. So it's I wasn't worried about that. But yeah, I think we went on a nice vacation somewhere.
When you first got into photojournalism, did you even just dare to dream of the possibility that one day you might win a Pulitzer Prize?
No, not at all. I first got into photography actually in freshman year in high school. It was a summer going into my freshman year in high school as a skateboarder back then, and a buddy of mine was taking these black and white photos, and I was just blown away by his photos. So my freshman year, I took basic photography 1. Went in the darkroom, just loved, like anybody back in the film days, you see your stuff developed in the trades, like, oh my God, that's magic.
Incredible.
Loved it. And then I wanted to shoot more. So I was going to wanted to shoot for the yearbook. But then that summer going into my sophomore year, I was in a serious car accident where I got knocked into a coma for 4 days. I had a fractured skull, hemorrhaging brain, collapsed lung, bruised my kidney. And my whole life changed. And everything that I perceived about the world completely changed. And so then I'd missed about 3 months of school. So when I got back to school, I wanted to shoot for the yearbook, but that was taken. But they said, hey, the high school paper needs a photographer. I didn't even know we had a high school paper. And so I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And so when I started shooting for the high school paper, my stuff started, seeing it published. And I'm like, oh my God, this is all I want to do for the rest of my life. And it was at that time I'm like, I just love photojournalism. And I had grown up, I was one of those that I would, get National Geographic and Life magazine and Time magazine. And I'd always just look at all the photos. I don't think I ever read a single article.
Yeah, same.
It's all about the photos. It's all about the photos.
Yeah.
It's like, and I was like, it was so, from when I was the, smallest kid, and it was always about the photos. And it's like, I'm now able to take those photos. But it's still being a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist it was something that like any photographer would dream about, but I didn't think it would ever happen. It was kind of being a community theater actor and say, I'm going to win the Academy Award someday. Like, it's just, okay, what's the odds of that happening?
So then what did you next, when you finished high school, did you go directly into photojournalism, or what was the next step?
Photojournalism through high school and through most of college. But then at the same time, I started doing a TV show called Music on the Edge, which was taping and interviewing bands. I went to San Francisco State. So that's why I was a photojournalism major there at San Francisco State for a while. Then I ended up switching to film because I was doing the TV show and just loved doing the TV show. I got into production, video production. I was shooting shooting, editing, and directing, producing. And so I ended up, this was around the time that film switched to digital. And I didn't have access to the darkroom like I used to have. And so digital cameras were still kind of crappy. And I just kind of, because part of the love of photography is the processing part of it. And because not having access to a darkroom, it's sort of like, I didn't want to just take a, photo drive up or whatever and get it, processed there. It's like and so I started getting into film and graduated San Francisco State, switched my major to film, did that. But I was doing the TV show for 4 years and ended up getting nominated for Northern California Emmy Awards for that one. And then moved to LA and then just did the film thing for total of 16, 17 years. I was in LA for 10 years. Produced several feature films, directed a bunch of pilots, and did a bunch of random stuff. Ended up directing a PSA for Aerosmith. That was kind of fun. They flew me to Montreal. I was in Molson Arena on stage with Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. And so I did a lot of really fun productions. Did a film that we shot as a DP for all over Europe, Spain, France, and Italy, and just did a lot of stuff until I got back into photojournalism when I moved back here to Santa Cruz. That's probably about 11 years ago. Got back into photojournalism and kind of became obsessed and passionate about it. And that's, started my path again. Started freelancing for a bunch of papers and then ended up shooting for the paper here, Santa Cruz Sentinel, for several years. Until Lookout started. And when Lookout first started in 2020, they called me up and I was first hesitant to take the job because I loved seeing my photo on the front page of the paper. I'd go down, run downstairs to the driveway, excited every day, open up the paper and see my photos in print. And it was like, there's nothing like that. And it's like, from doing that to doing some online, I'm like, I don't know. Like, do I really want to? I'm glad
you took the job now, though.
I know. And then so it was my wife, my damn wife. She's like, Kevin, this could be an amazing opportunity. You're going to be their number one guy. And newspapers are going downhill, which is, the readership of newspapers and local journalism is just going down the toilet. And so she's like, you got to do it. So she convinced me. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. And it was the greatest decision ever made. Shooting for Lookout has been an absolute dream where previously I'd be shooting like, let's say a protest, and I'd be there, 2, 3, 4 hours shooting a protest. When I'd be shooting for the paper, they'd use like 1 or 2 photos. With Lookout, they'll do a full gallery. Sometimes I'll do 20, 30 of my photos in a gallery. And they'll, sometimes I'll do video. They'll edit together these little video shorts and just the variety of stuff that I'm able to do, the creative freedom that I have. I'm able to do my own projects, long-term projects. It's one I'm working on, long-term project for the homeless down in South County and the migrant workers. So it just working for Lookout has just been the most unbelievable experience.
So what are your aspirations now in terms of photojournalism? I mean, where do you go after the Pulitzer Prize? Like, where do you go from there?
That was a joke. After we won the Pulitzer, and when we all gathered around the conference room and saw the broadcast, and when they made the announcement, and we all celebrated, and we're all crying and hugging each other and just exuberant, and then. About an hour after that, we're all just standing around. We're like, now what? We're done. We're done.
Yeah,
nowhere to go. Yeah. And then we're going, now we got to get our second. But now nothing's changed in the sense that for me, I just want to tell stories visually that have an impact and then make a difference. So that's why I'm been focusing on this one story on the homeless. Been spending about 8 months now on developing on that. there's a lot of stories that I really want to work on. There's another one that I'm working on with an author. Is the people, the refugees they're going across the border through Amazon. They're the asylum seekers that are getting escorted by the cartel across the border, and what happens to them. So I'm working on that story with an author right now, and that is an insane piece where, it was just a couple of weeks ago I was over there, and we spent several days in the middle of the Arizona desert. The day that she picked me up is 113 degrees out. And but the last day that we were there, we're in the middle of the desert. It's literally where the wall ends, in the middle of the Arizona desert, and you're a good 2.5 hour drive away from any civilization. And the cartels drop them off right at the end of the border wall. And so these humanitarian groups are there, and they get them food and water and take care of them and call the Border Patrol. And the Border Patrol picks them up and processes them as asylum seekers. And it was really, really heavy story that we're working on. That one day we ended up rescuing 48 asylum seekers. 3 of them, one of them, 6-year-old, 9-year-old, and a 13-year-old, were traveling, I think it's from Honduras, by themselves. It was extremely heavy story being with them, and shooting and hearing these stories of people from Africa, from all over the world that had made this journey. Some of them were a month and a half, 2 months, traveling across South Central America through Mexico, getting robbed, and just like these incredibly sad stories. So that's an example of one of the stories that I've been working on with this author.
As you know, it's super interesting because I'm not going to get into the politics of it all, but we have a similar situation, of course, over here in the UK, where people arrive in small boats, or really dinghies. Yeah. That's really what they are, and they've traveled from all sorts of, from Africa, wherever, potentially crossed the Mediterranean Sea in some makeshift floating device, traveled all the way through a variety of countries until they eventually make it to the northern coast of France, only then to, cross the English Channel. In what can only be described most of the time as like little rubber dinghies, that are not seaworthy and unbelievably dangerous. And of course, a lot of those migrants lose their lives in the process as they're being taken to the cleaners by, people traffickers and all the rest of it, until they finally arrive, on the shore, over in southern England. And it's, and people think about that, whatever they want to think, but the human stories that those people have experienced, getting to that spot from wherever they started their journey, potentially months beforehand, is, I can't wrap my head around that, because I'm annoyed when I have to travel 8 hours to a place. You know what I mean? By comparison, in total luxury, and it's hard for me to imagine how desperate somebody has to be to put themselves and potentially their children on, a rubber dinghy and, crossing, the English Channel, and to put yourself and your children and stuff into that amount of danger. You got to be super desperate. I can't even really wrap my head around that. As a parent, how desperate do you have to be to do that?
Yeah, it's incredibly tough. And hearing these stories, it's like you can't even imagine what they must be going through in order to put themselves through these hardships to, paying sometimes, thousands and thousands of dollars, like everything they got in order to make this journey to get to the United States. And the sad thing is, the heartbreaking thing is that a lot of them are going to just be sent right back.
It's hard for me to compute how much suffering somebody has to go through to put themselves into that position,
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. On a journalistic, from a journalistic point of view, these stories are absolutely incredible and have to be told. I think that's the important part. I grew up in a country that was absolutely devastated after the Second World War. And I sort of remember, hearing stories from my grandparents as to how they, put their lives back together after everything was laid to rubble, and so I can sympathize with people who, just try and find a better life elsewhere when that's the situation that they find themselves in, and likewise, in a situation like, a natural disaster, like we were talking about earlier. I remember looking at that photo that you shot of, of that person standing in front of, well, half his house missing, and I was thinking, man, it's hard for me to put myself into that situation to think like, what, I don't know how I would have dealt with it. I don't know if I would have had the strength to just, go and rebuild, or whether I would have just packed my bags and gone somewhere else, because
yeah, I know.
What would be your sort of number one tip for anybody in 2024 who's thinking about going into photojournalism? What would be sort of your number one tip for somebody like that?
Shoot a lot. Like, just find your own stories and just constantly shoot and put yourself in different situations, different lighting situations, and shoot. And when you shoot something, shoot it from all angles, from all focal lengths, all different lenses, and just try to get complete coverage, and always think in your back of your mind, what is the story? But it's, the best, the only way of really doing it is just, just shooting. And it's just on a daily basis, just take your camera and just find your own stories, whether it's, a local little league team, and tell the story of them in practice and games and what they're going through, or, it's just, or finding, like one of your relatives and ask them about their life and what they do, and just follow in detail. And it's just, you just need to shoot. You just need to, like, there's no better way to get better than just constantly nonstop shoot. And, and it's literally in every situation, in every environment, in every kind of lighting you can imagine, just so that you know how to adjust. Because in photojournalism, you never have control over anything. You never have control over lighting. You never have control of your scene. Never have control of your subject or what's going on. And if you want to be in photojournalism, you gotta just adapt. And the only way to adapt is to practice shooting in every environment, in every situation, and just be relentless. Always just run around and just shoot at as many different angles and complete coverage. That's my biggest thing. And then as far as like getting a job and getting yourself recognized, it's all about social media and kind of making a name for yourself, where you put out your best stuff and you be consistent about it, so that you develop a following, and people start to see your images and go, wow. A good instance, this kid, John Hefty, who was one of our interns, I would see his stuff on Instagram all the time. It was unbelievable shots that you do, sports photography of local high school and even college stuff, just unbelievable. And so I was gone. I had to go on vacation, so I was always trying to find people, really good shooters that can cover for me. And so I knew he is local, so I called him up. I said, "Hey, would you be interested in covering for me sometime when I go?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'd love to, but I need to know when, because I need to see if my parents could be able to drive me." I'm like, "Wait, what?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm in high school." I had no idea. His stuff was so good, like ridiculously good. And so he ended up being our intern. He shot for us for over a year, and now he's going to Arizona, and that's what his dream is. He now shoots all these Major League Baseball games all the time, and it's like, and the whole reason why is because he showed himself on social media and posted his best stuff and really made an impact to me personally. I'm like, God, this guy is really good. And so it's just getting yourself out there, getting your name and your photos out there, and just really showcasing your best stuff and being consistent about it to make a name for yourself. That's kind of actually how I got my job with the Sentinel. Is I was doing the same thing. I was doing a lot of shoots and covering a lot of stories, and I submitted it onto Facebook on different Facebook groups. And then I just started submitting it to the editor, and she started trusting me, and these posts that I was doing on Facebook were getting recognition, and a lot of people started following them and started kind of getting named for myself. And then, the editor for Sentinel started sending me on assignments, and next thing I knew, I was one of the shooters. So it's just being consistent and just putting yourself out there, and you gotta be self-promote yourself.
The thing that's always attracted me to photojournalism in general is the fact that it's so, in a sense, it's so varied. Because you mentioned like one day, you're out shooting a sports team, so there's a degree of sports photography in there. Then you're in a restaurant, maybe taking some portraits. There are a lot of different sort of genres of photography that you get to be able to cover. And then, of course, there's the storytelling element, which I'm personally super interested in. As far as photography in particular is concerned. And you've got to be able to deal with all these different things, rather than, I'm not putting that down, but rather than being, in inverted commas, only a sports photographer, or only a portrait photographer, or, only a, toy photographer or something. And that's the thing that's always attracted me to it. It's so varied in comparison to other jobs in photography.
It is. That's why, I consider my job the best job in the entire world, because every single day is so different. Every single shoot is completely different, and that it's so much fun where, I get to be creative, would do portrait shots. I'll bring, some strobes and some, light box, and just do some really nice, beautiful portrait stuff that will do a profile on somebody. And then, literally 10, 20 minutes later, I'm running around shooting a protest. And then I'm doing, food photography. And then at night I'll be doing sports photography. So it's literally like, if you love photography, it's everything that you get to do in one, and you can be as creative as you want. And it's just so much fun, and you never get bored. And that's what's even cool, is that even when I do like stuff that normally, like, let's just say it's as a presser, you have, a politician going to be at a podium and just going to be talking about something. And normally it's like, oh, God, I got to do another presser. But for me, it's like, all right, cool. I'll get the shots I need to get real quick, that stuff in the can, that, the wide shot, medium shot, him at the podium. But then I get to be creative, right? All right, I got that stuff in the can. Now let's see if I go behind him and shoot like, the people shooting him. You have the profile shot of him, or I shoot close up of just like maybe close up of him and on the mic. And so I get to be creative. So it's like, I get to have fun with stuff that's normally just laborious and like, but it's just being creative and turning the stuff that's normally kind of a dull shoot into something that could be really fun and exciting. And so I look at every single assignment, every single shoot. I do just like that. And so it's literally the best job in the world. And I get to meet people all day, every day. I get to meet some of the most amazing, incredible people and hear their stories, create rapport, and I mean, hundreds of people that now I've created this relationship with, where all the time, they go, "Oh, hey, Kevin," and it's like when my main thing that I do for every shoot that I have, I try to create a rapport with the person so that they open up and they trust me and they understand who I am, and they don't feel uncomfortable in front of the camera. Because majority of all people, when a camera comes up to their face, they're like, no, I don't want to get my photo taken. Good 80 to 90% of the time that I get done with a shoot, they're like, wow, that was easy. That was fun. Because one of the things I do is that I include them. I'll take photos and I'll show them the shot and get them involved so they go, oh, wow, that's really cool. Or it gives them confidence that they understand the story that I'm telling. Even if I'm telling a photojournalistic story and there's somebody doing a speech or somebody doing a march, and I'll get a shot, and then later on after the fact, then I'll show them, they go, oh, wow, all right, cool. So that they, it's about just developing the rapport and developing the trust with them so that at any time people know who I am and they know my character and what I'm about, and that I'm not there to just put up a camera and get an image, but I'm there to tell their story. I want to listen to who they are and what's going on with them. And it's really special when you're able to do that.
Where do you see photojournalism going? I mean, what I'm thinking is, the sort of media landscape has been changing dramatically over the last decade or so, with, yes, you mentioned earlier, with print publications, newspapers losing readership, social media taking the place for a lot of people, including somehow my kids. A lot of people tend to get their news from TikTok or something, these days, or Instagram. Where do you see the future of photojournalism going?
That's a really tough question, because the nature of how people, get their news on TikTok, and there's just so much like AI stuff, and there's so much mistrust. Full-time photojournalists are such a rare breed right now that it is incredibly frustrating and kind of depressing, because the shots that you get now are not what it used to be. You used to be getting these photos that show the humanity in people, and that show these images that really tell a story. And now you're getting these iPhone photos that are just submitted by viewers. They're like, all right. And you can tell that there's not the same thought that's going behind the image. There's not the same kind of love and passion that's being shown in a lot of photographs that are in the news and that are done today. And that there's so much distrust because of AI, and because you can manipulate anything. And photojournalists, we have this moral code. We are not allowed to manipulate, change, add, delete anything in any photograph ever. And so there's this moral code that photojournalists have, that when all these newspapers have been laying off the photojournalists and using content generated material and images, you suddenly lose that accountability and moral compass that traditional photojournalists have. So it's a little bit frustrating, and it's kind of sad to see the state of photojournalism go the way that it's going right now. But it is what it is. But at the same time, there's more photos taken now ever before, and more beautiful, incredible, amazing photographs that are done ever before, which is also inspirational. But is it telling the true story, and how much of it is manipulated, and how much of it is done by somebody that's an art photographer rather than a photojournalist, where they want to make a pretty picture and are manipulating it or fixing it up to make it look like the most amazing photo ever instead of telling the true story.
And I think that's, those are great words to finish this podcast on. It is all about telling the story, and there are stories to be told everywhere, no matter whether it's a big city and a massive event, or whether it's a small community that is suffering greatly from a natural disaster. Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. What a phenomenal story, not only on a human level, but the fact that your ability to tell that story so poignantly was recognized with the Pulitzer Prize. That's the sort of thing that makes me believe that good, excellent photojournalism will be around for a long time, and there's very, very clearly a need for it. So, Kevin, thank you so much for being the guest on the Camera Shake podcast this week.
Hey, thank you, Kirsten. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay, folks, that is it for today. It was awesome having Kevin on the show. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you like. Check out episode 208 with Pics and Perfects unmatched in there. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us continue creating and bringing you more exciting episodes every week. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, did you know that there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? All you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. So thank you for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars or your diary. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.